The wrench clanged against concrete. Frank Rodriguez's calloused hands froze mid-turn as a woman's gasp echoed through the parking garage. She collapsed. Designer heels scraped. Black suit wrinkled against cold asphalt. Her chest rose in shallow, desperate bursts. Frank dropped everything. His work boots pounded concrete as he sprinted toward her BMW. She clutched his paint-stained shirt with manicured fingers. Terror flooded her brown eyes. "Help. Me." The words barely escaped her lips before she went limp. Frank pressed his rough palms against her chest, pumped hard, breathed life into elegant lips that had never known a day of real work. Sirens wailed, her eyelids fluttered open. She stared up at him, this stranger in dirty coveralls who held her beating heart in his hands. Neither knew that in saving her life, he had just set in motion a collision between two worlds that would shatter everything both believed about love, power, and the price of being truly seen. The emergency room erupted as paramedics wheeled her through automatic doors. Frank jogged alongside, tool belt jangling with each step. Under harsh fluorescent lights, he saw her clearly mid-30s, olive skin speaking of expensive treatments, tailored suit probably worth more than he made in months. "Are you family?" a nurse asked, thrusting a clipboard forward. Frank hesitated, studying the unconscious woman whose life he'd saved. Her spilled purse revealed scattered credit cards, but no identification. The nurse tapped her pen impatiently. "Emergency contact, then. Someone needs to sign." Frank's hand trembled as he wrote his name across the hospital form. The responsibility felt heavier than it should for a stranger. 20 minutes crawled by before a doctor emerged, pulling off latex gloves. "She's stable," he announced. "Stress-induced cardiac episode. Could have been fatal without immediate intervention. You saved her life." Frank's shoulders sagged with relief he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The doctor smiled slightly. "She's been asking for the man who saved her life. Said she won't rest until she thanks him properly." Behind the curtain, she looked smaller, without terror consuming her features. Dark hair had escaped its professional bun, falling in soft waves around pale cheeks. When she saw Frank, something flickered across her expression, surprise mixed with recognition of something unexpected. "You stayed," she said quietly, her voice carrying traces of an accent he couldn't place. Frank shrugged, suddenly self-conscious about his disheveled appearance. "Couldn't leave without knowing you were okay." Anyone would have done the same. But they both knew that wasn't entirely true. "I'm Isabella," she said, extending a hand soft as expensive silk. "Everyone calls me Bella. It feels less formal, more like a real person." Frank wiped his palm on his jeans before accepting her handshake, aware of the grease that never quite washed out. "Frank Rodriguez. I fix things that break pipes, faucets, people's plumbing problems." Her genuine smile transformed her face entirely. "Apparently you fix people too." The steady beep of monitors filled comfortable silence, and Frank found himself studying the small scar above her left eyebrow that makeup couldn't hide. "What do you do?" Frank asked, nodding towards her expensive clothes. Bella's fingers worried her hospital blanket nervously. "I work in tech," she said vaguely, eyes not quite meeting his. "Nothing too exciting. Mostly problem-solving and meetings about things that probably don't matter much." Frank chuckled, despite the serious setting. "Well, tech pays better than plumbing. My daughter Rosa always tells me to get a real job with benefits." Bella's expression grew unexpectedly serious. "Money isn't everything," she said quietly. "Today proved that to me." A nurse appeared with discharge papers, shoes squeaking against polished floors. Bella signed with an expensive pen, her signature flowing confidently. Frank noticed her hands shaking slightly, aftershocks from trauma. "Do you have someone to drive you home?" he asked, concerned about her navigating traffic. "I could call my assistant," she replied, but made no move toward her phone. Frank heard himself speaking before thinking it through. "I could give you a ride. My truck's nothing fancy, but it runs." Her eyes met his, and he glimpsed vulnerability beneath her composed surface. "I'd like that very much." The evening air carried October's crisp bite as they walked slowly toward Frank's battered pickup. Bella moved carefully, one hand pressed to her chest where pain lingered. The truck looked worse, parked between a Mercedes and Lexus rust spots scattered across faded paint, duct tape holding the mirror. Frank opened her door, brushing food wrappers from the worn seat. "Sorry about the mess. My daughter Rosa usually rides shotgun, and 9-year-olds aren't known for tidiness." Pride colored his words despite his attempt at casual nonchalance. "She sounds wonderful," Bella said softly. They drove through downtown Portland as sunset painted the sky brilliant orange and purple. Bella directed him toward West Hills, where houses grew larger with each mile. Frank felt increasingly out of place as his engine worked against the steep grade. When Bella said, "Turn here," they were at imposing gates protecting what looked like an estate. Frank stared at the sprawling modern house beyond iron gates, floor-to-ceiling windows, circular driveway, elaborate fountain. This wasn't just wealth. This was serious money. "Nice place," he managed. Bella flushed. "Too big for one person." "I rattle around like a marble in a shoebox." Bella hesitated with her hand on the door handle, seeming reluctant to end their time together. "Would you like coffee sometime?" she asked, turning to face him fully. "To let me thank you properly." Frank's first instinct was refusal. This woman lived in a different universe. But loneliness in her expression mirrored his own. "I know a good diner on Southeast Division," he heard himself say. "Nothing fancy, but decent coffee and better pie." Bella's smile was radiant. "That sounds absolutely perfect. I haven't been somewhere like that in longer than I care to admit." Frank watched her disappear through automatic gates, sitting in his cooling truck for minutes. What was he doing? This woman came from a world he'd never belonged to. But as he drove home to his modest apartment where Rosa was probably doing homework, he found himself anticipating that coffee with surprising enthusiasm. Rosa was at the kitchen table, surrounded by worksheets. "You're really late, Papa," she said matter-of-factly. Frank kissed her head, breathing strawberry shampoo. Had an emergency that became something bigger. Rosa studied his face with 9-year-old intensity. "You look happy different." 3 days later, Frank stood outside Rosie's diner, checking his reflection, and immediately regretting the vanity. He'd worn his best jeans and a shirt Rosa had ironed, declaring he needed to look presentable for his friend. When Bella arrived, she looked nothing like the hospital businesswoman. Dark jeans, cream sweater, hair loose, minimal makeup revealing freckles. She looked younger, more real. The diner hummed with lunch crowd, chaos construction workers, office staff, retirees. Bella studied the menu with genuine curiosity, ordering meatloaf without hesitation. They talked easily about old movies and terrible reality TV. Bella asked about Rosa with real interest, laughing at Frank's plumbing disaster stories. When Frank mentioned Rosa's mother died 3 years ago after fighting cancer, Bella's sympathy felt authentic. "That must have been incredibly difficult," she said, her hand briefly covering his. "What about you?" Frank asked as their waitress refilled thick mugs. Bella's fingers tightened around her cup. "Parents died in college. Just me now. Work keeps me busy." When their check came, Frank was faster. "My treat. You saved my life." Outside in Portland's drizzle, she turned with an almost shy smile. "Would you like to do this again?" Then her phone buzzed insistently. "Sorry, work crisis," she said, answering with, "Harrison here." Frank caught fragments. "Henderson acquisition? Board meeting Friday?" Board meetings? The contradiction puzzled him, but Bella had stepped away to handle the emergency. Over 2 weeks, they met 3 more times. Each encounter deepened his attraction and confusion. She knew expensive wine, but claimed basic tech support. Designer purses, but nothing special job. Business knowledge, but deflected company questions. Frank looked forward to meetings with intensity that both thrilled and worried him. The 4th time, Bella suggested including Rosa. Frank hesitated. He'd kept dating separate from his daughter since Maria's death. But Bella felt different, safer. "She'd enjoy meeting you." Fair warning, she has strong opinions about everything. Saturday at the family restaurant, Rosa took to Bella immediately. Within minutes, she was showing drawings and explaining 4th-grade politics. Bella listened with focused attention adults rarely gave children. When Rosa mentioned her renewable energy science project, Bella's excitement was unmistakable. "Solar panels are fascinating. Did you know they work on cloudy days?" She explained photovoltaic cells with enthusiasm that made Rosa beam. They walked through Laurelhurst Park, Rosa skipping ahead to feed ducks. "She's wonderful," Bella said, watching Rosa conduct serious discussions with mallards. "You've done an incredible job." Frank's throat tightened. "Maria did most of the work the first 6 years. I'm trying not to mess up her foundation." Bella's hand found his arm briefly. "You're doing far more than not messing up. Rosa is confident, curious, kind. Those don't happen by accident." The afternoon stretched perfect until Rosa's innocent enthusiasm brought everything crashing down. "Miss Bella," Rosa called from the pond, "my friend Madison's mum works for Harrison Industries." "Maybe you know her. Some lady CEO named Isabella Harrison." Frank felt the world tilt as connections formed. Isabella. Tech company. Board meetings. Harrison Industries. He'd seen those logos everywhere. Bella had gone very still, face pale. Rosa continued chattering about solar panels while tension crackled between adults. "We should head home," Frank said quietly. "Rosa has homework." The walk to their cars felt strained, weighted with unasked questions and growing suspicion. That night, Frank sat at his laptop with cooling coffee. He typed Isabella Harrison CEO and felt his world shift. There she was, his Bella in sleek business attire before corporate backdrops. Articles painted her as a tech powerhouse who'd built Harrison Industries into a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Magazine covers, newspaper quotes, photographs with politicians. The woman he'd shared coffee with was one of Portland's most powerful people. She'd been lying about everything that mattered. His phone buzzed with Bella's text. "Thank you for today. Can we talk soon?" He stared without responding. How could he trust anything she said? Sleep eluded him. The next day passed distracted snapping at clients, nearly flooding a basement, burning dinner until Rosa ordered pizza and declared him broken. Bella called Tuesday evening. He let it go to voicemail, deleting it unheard. Wednesday, Thursday. Each ignored call accompanied by increasingly concerned texts. Frank, please call back. I want to answer all your questions honestly. I'm worried you're angry. Can we please talk? When she asked if something was wrong, Frank finally responded, We need to talk. Laurelhurst Park, Saturday morning. 10 a.m. Come alone. Saturday dawned grey and drizzly. Frank arrived early, settling on a bench overlooking the pond where Rosa had fed ducks. For 3 years he'd built a careful life focused on Rosa and work-safe, predictable, protected. Bella had cracked something open he'd thought permanently sealed, and now he felt exposed, foolish. She arrived exactly on time, wearing jeans and rain jacket, hair in a simple ponytail. Without makeup, she looked younger, vulnerable. But Frank steeled himself against sympathy. You know, she said quietly. Not a question. Frank nodded. Isabella Harrison, CEO of Harrison Industries, net worth $800 million. Bella's hands twisted nervously. I wanted to tell you. So many times. But you didn't. Frank interrupted. For weeks you sat across from me, let me pay for coffee, listened to me worry about rent and said nothing. Bella flinched. It wasn't like that. Then explain it. Because I'm having trouble understanding how someone accidentally lies for 3 weeks straight. Tears gathered in her eyes. I was scared. Do you know what it's like never knowing if someone likes you for yourself or what you can provide? When you looked at me in that hospital, you saw someone worth saving. Not a net worth, just a person. Frank felt his anger wavering but held on to it. So you decided to test me? String me along to see if I was worthy? Bella shook her head frantically. No, it was the first time in years I felt like myself. Not the CEO, just Bella, the person I was before success consumed everything. And who was that? Despite himself, Frank was curious. Her smile was sad. Someone from a trailer park in Ohio. Dad worked construction, Mum cleaned offices. I built this company from nothing, but when I got everything I'd dreamed of, I'd lost everything that mattered. They sat in uncomfortable silence, watching joggers navigate puddles. What about Rosa? Frank asked finally. She's attached to you? Did you think about that when you decided to play dress-up? Bella's face crumpled. I love Rosa. That was never fake. She deserves every good thing. The implication hung between them. Bella could provide opportunities Frank never could. He stood abruptly, pacing to the pond's edge. You're talking about my daughter like a charity project. You make everything I've built feel inadequate. His voice rose. This is what I feared. You swoop in with billions, and suddenly what I provide feels insufficient. That's not true, Bella protested desperately. You're an incredible father. Rosa is lucky to have you. But Frank was shaking his head. I think you should stay away from us, he said, words like glass in his throat. Rosa will be disappointed, but she'll recover. Kids are resilient. He heard Bella call his name but didn't turn around. If he saw her pain, he might weaken. The walk home felt endless. There had been signs, business knowledge, expensive tastes, paying without checking prices. But he'd been too grateful for companionship to see the obvious. When Rosa returned that evening, her questions turned to dreaded territory. When are we seeing Miss Bella again? She promised to come to my science fair. Frank sat on her bed, searching for gentle words. "Miss Bella is very busy with work. She might not spend as much time with us anymore." Rosa's face fell. "But she likes us." She said I was smart and funny. Frank smoothed her hair. "Sometimes adults have complicated lives. It doesn't mean she doesn't care, but things change." Rosa processed this seriously. "Did you have a fight?" Frank hesitated. "Something like that." Rosa nodded solemnly. "Mama used to say people who care about each other find ways to fix their fights." The following week passed in determined routine. Frank threw himself into work while Rosa became quieter, picking at meals. She asked pointed questions about honesty and forgiveness. Frank wondered if his pride was hurting Rosa more than Bella's deception had hurt them. A week later, he found an envelope under his door expensive stationery with a check for $5,000. "I know you won't want this, but don't let pride deprive Rosa of opportunities. This isn't charity, it's a friend helping a friend." Frank stared at the check before tearing it into pieces. The gesture felt both necessary and somehow petty. Rosa's science fair was Thursday evening. Frank had left work early for this important event. As they examined projects, Rosa seemed subdued despite her bronze ribbon. Frank was admiring a volcano when Rosa tugged his sleeve. "Papa, Miss Bella's here." Frank followed her gaze and felt his heart skip. Bella stood near the entrance looking uncertain, dressed simply in jeans and blue sweater. Their eyes met across the room. Before Frank could react, Rosa had broken away, weaving through the crowd with determination. "You came!" Rosa exclaimed, launching into Bella's arms. Frank watched his daughter's face light up with pure joy. Rosa proudly displayed her solar panel project, while Bella examined it with genuine fascination, asking technical questions that made Rosa glow with pride. Other parents gathered around, drawn by Rosa's excitement and Bella's knowledgeable commentary about renewable energy applications. Frank stood at the crowd's edge, watching his daughter shine under attention from someone who clearly understood her intellectual interests and appreciated her curiosity about environmental science. As families filtered out, Rosa clutched her bronze ribbon while Frank and Bella stood awkwardly nearby. "Thank you for coming," Frank said quietly. It meant a lot to Rosa. Driving home, Rosa was unusually quiet until she finally spoke. Miss Bella looked sad, like when you pretend you're not upset, but your eyes give it away. Frank glanced at his perceptive daughter in the rearview mirror. Adults sometimes have complicated feelings about things. Rosa considered this diplomatic response. "Do you think she's lonely, Papa?" The question hit Frank like a physical blow. In his focus on betrayal and deception, he'd forgotten the vulnerability he'd glimpsed that first day at the hospital. Beneath all her success and wealth, she was fundamentally alone in ways money couldn't fix. The next morning brought Mrs. Santos, their elderly neighbor, with coffee and determined advice. "Mijo, we need to talk about this lady friend." Frank felt heat in his cheeks. "It's complicated, Mrs. Santos." She fixed him with a look that had intimidated generations of children. "Love is always complicated. The question is whether it's worth fighting for." She stirred sugar thoughtfully. "My husband lied to me once about gambling money. I made him sleep on the couch for months. But sometimes people lie because they're scared of losing something precious, not because they want to hurt you." "That little girl has been sadder than I've seen since her mama died, and you've been walking around like someone stole your favorite tool." Mrs. Santos continued with characteristic directness. "Maybe ask yourself what you really lost. Did this woman treat Rosa badly? Disrespect you? Break promises that mattered to children? Frank found himself shaking his head to each question. If anything, Bella had been wonderful with Rosa, respectful of their circumstances, completely reliable in small promises. Then maybe the question isn't whether she lied, but whether you're brave enough to build something real with someone who clearly cares about you both. After Mrs. Santos left, Frank thought about courage and fear in new ways. It had taken courage to save Bella's life, to rebuild after Maria's death, to risk his heart on love again. But trusting Bella despite her deception felt like the scariest challenge yet. That evening, Frank made a surprising decision. He sat Rosa down for serious conversation. "I need to tell you about Miss Bella's secret." Rosa's eyes widened with curiosity. Frank explained carefully that Bella was actually very successful and wealthy, worried they might treat her differently if they knew. "So she lied?" Rosa asked. "Kind of," Frank admitted. "She told true things, but left out others because she was scared." "Do you think people deserve second chances when they make mistakes because they're scared instead of mean?" Rosa asked with 9-year-old wisdom. Frank thought about Maria's forgiveness philosophy, Mrs. Santos's insight about frightened hearts. "I think that depends on whether mistakes come from fear or cruelty." "What do you think about Miss Bella?" Rosa answered without hesitation. "She has a scared heart, Papa." "Like when I hid my bad math test because I was afraid you'd be disappointed. I wasn't trying to be bad, just scared of what might happen." That weekend, Frank made another terrifying decision. He called Harrison Industries, hands shaking as professional receptionists transferred his call through corporate hierarchies. "I'll see if she's available," came the polite response after he identified himself. The wait felt eternal until the receptionist returned with surprise in her voice. "Ms. Harrison can see you at 4 this afternoon. Should I send a car?" Frank almost laughed at the absurdity. "No car necessary. I'll find my way." The Harrison Industries building was intimidating glass and steel, expensive suits, people moving with corporate confidence. Frank felt out of place, but had learned belonging was about attitude, not attire. The 32nd floor reception area cost more than his annual income floor-to-ceiling windows, offering panoramic city views, museum-quality furniture. When Bella emerged from her office, Frank barely recognized her. Sleek business attire, elegant chignon, diamond earrings, this was Isabella Harrison, CEO, completely in her element and utterly intimidating. But then she smiled, vulnerability flickering behind her professional mask. "Frank," she said quietly, voice carrying surprise, hope, and worry. "Thank you for coming." "Please, come in." Her office managed to be both impressive and personal, awards balanced by touches of the woman he'd known. "How's Rosa?" she asked with genuine concern as they settled into chairs across from her massive desk. "Good." Still proud of that bronze ribbon, Bella's smile was authentic. She should be. That was genuinely impressive work for someone her age. Frank gathered courage for honesty, more frightening than any physical danger he'd faced. "I've been thinking about what you said. About being scared. I guess I've been scared, too, of not being enough for Rosa, of wanting things I have no business wanting, of loving someone whose world is so different from mine." The words rushed out, weeks of suppressed feelings finally finding voice in this unlikely corporate setting. "But Rosa asked me something I can't stop thinking about," Frank continued, meeting Bella's eyes across the polished desk. whether people deserve second chances when mistakes come from frightened hearts instead of cruel ones. He saw tears gathering despite her efforts at composure. I realized you weren't the only one being dishonest. I was terrified of what your success meant, that you could give Rosa opportunities I never could, that maybe she'd be better off with someone like you permanently in her life. The admission of his deepest insecurities hung between them like a bridge he'd finally found courage to cross. I would never try to replace you, Bella said urgently, leaning forward with desperate intensity. You're her father, and she adores you completely. You've raised an incredible human being, smart, kind, curious, confident. Those aren't things money can buy or corporate connections can provide. Those come from love and presence and showing up every single day, which is exactly what you've been doing since her mother died. Frank felt something loosening in his chest, a knot of fear and inadequacy that had been choking him for weeks. They talked for over an hour about fears and hopes, the seemingly impossible logistics of blending their different worlds. Would you like to have dinner this weekend? Bella finally asked, her voice carrying both hope and uncertainty. Somewhere nice, but not intimidatingly expensive, and I promise to let you pay for your own meal if that makes you more comfortable. Frank found himself nodding before conscious thought could interfere with emotional truth. I'd like that very much, he said, meaning it completely. But complete honesty this time. No more secrets or half-truths, no matter how well-intentioned they might seem. If we're going to make this work, it has to be built on truth from now on. Saturday evening found Frank adjusting his tie for the third time, while Rosa provided commentary from her perch on his bed. You look handsome, Papa, she said with 9-year-old solemnity. Miss Bella will be impressed, I think. Mrs. Santos had agreed to watch Rosa with enthusiasm that suggested she approved of this development. The restaurant Bella chose was perfect upscale enough to feel special, casual enough that Frank felt comfortable. She was waiting by the window when he arrived, elegant in a navy dress, hair loose around her shoulders. You look wonderful, she said as he approached. You look beautiful, he replied, meaning it with every fiber of his being. The evening flowed naturally now that the burden of secrets had been lifted between them. Bella shared her actual work board meetings about environmental policy, strategic planning for renewable energy expansion, the challenges of leading a company committed to sustainability while remaining profitable. Frank told stories from his week, including a memorable flooded basement incident. What struck him was how naturally their different experiences complemented each other, each bringing unique perspectives that enriched their shared understanding of the world around them. Over shared tiramisu, Frank took her hand across the small table. I have a confession too, he said, his voice serious but warm with affection. I'm not just attracted to you, and this isn't just about companionship or Rosa needing positive female influence. I'm falling in love with you. Actually, I think I fell in love with you weeks ago, and was too scared to admit it, even to myself. Bella's eyes filled with tears she made no attempt to hide. I love you too, she said simply, her voice steady despite her emotional response. I love your integrity and your dedication to Rosa, and the way you see problems as puzzles to be solved rather than obstacles to complain about endlessly. When they kissed across the table, it was soft and sweet and full of promise for a future neither had dared imagine possible just weeks earlier. The kiss tasted of dessert and hope and new beginnings that scared them both in the best possible way. As they walked to their cars afterward, Bella slipped her hand into his with natural ease. So what happens now? she asked quietly. Where do we go from here with all our complicated circumstances and different worlds? Frank squeezed her fingers gently. We figure it out together, he said with more confidence than he felt. One day at a time, with complete honesty and patience, and maybe a little faith that love can bridge gaps that seem impossible. 6 months later, Frank stood in the backyard of the house they'd chosen together, a comfortable 4-bedroom home in an excellent school district that split the difference between their previous neighborhoods perfectly. Rosa was demonstrating her latest solar panel project to a small group of friends from her new school, explaining photovoltaic energy conversion with confidence and expertise that made both Frank and Bella beam with parental pride. The science fair ribbon from her old school hung in a place of honor in her new bedroom, but it had been joined by several others as her interests and achievements continued to expand under Bella's enthusiastic mentorship and Frank's steady support. She's incredible, Bella murmured, slipping her arm through Frank's as they watched Rosa hold court among her fascinated audience of 4th graders. We're so lucky to have her in our lives, bringing joy and curiosity to everything she touches. Frank smiled, still sometimes amazed by the transformation their small family had undergone through love, honesty, and mutual respect. She's lucky to have both of us, he corrected gently. Different kinds of support and love and perspective, but both completely real and unconditional. It had taken time and patience and many honest conversations, but they'd found their rhythm as an unconventional but genuinely happy family unit. That evening, after Rosa's friends had gone home and their daughter was settled in bed with a new book about renewable energy technologies, Frank and Bella sat on their back porch, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky above Portland. The city lights twinkled below them like earthbound constellations, and the air smelled of roses from their neighbor's garden. Any regrets? Bella asked quietly, her head resting comfortably on Frank's shoulder. About taking a chance on someone as complicated and wealthy and potentially problematic as me? Frank considered the question seriously, thinking about all the ways their lives had changed and grown and become infinitely richer since that dramatic day in the parking garage. Only one, he said finally, and felt Bella tense slightly beside him with concern. I regret that it took us so long to get here, that we wasted precious time on fear and pride and misunderstanding when we could have been building this beautiful life together from the very beginning. Bella lifted her head to look at him, her eyes reflecting starlight and love and contentment he'd never expected to find again after Maria's death. Maybe we needed that time, she said thoughtfully. Maybe we had to learn to trust ourselves and our own worth before we could trust each other completely and build something lasting together. In the distance, they could hear Rosa moving around her room, probably working on yet another science project or reading about environmental technology by flashlight under her covers. Their life together wasn't perfect. Frank still worried about money sometimes, despite their improved circumstances. Bella still struggled with work-life balance and corporate pressures, and Rosa was developing distinctly strong opinions about everything from renewable energy policy to proper dishwasher loading techniques. But it was real and honest and full of the kind of love that made ordinary moments feel extraordinary, transforming simple evenings into treasured memories they'd carry forever. I love you, Frank said quietly, the words still feeling new and slightly miraculous even after months of saying them regularly to this remarkable woman who'd changed his life so completely. I love you too, Bella replied, settling back against his shoulder with contentment that spoke to dreams fulfilled and fears overcome through courage and commitment. Above them, stars wheeled through their ancient patterns, while inside their house, Rosa dreamed of solar panels and wind turbines and a future powered by clean energy and unlimited possibility. Sometimes, Frank reflected, the best things in life really did come from the most unexpected places, requiring only courage enough to say yes when love offered its transformative gift to hearts brave enough to receive it.